Hello, I am Noemí Planas, Network Development Director at WIN. The Worldwide Independent Network connects and supports independent music trade associations globally, focusing on long-term development and sustainability. One of our missions is building associative structures and regional networks, and Latin America is a key area of our work. In recent months, we have often heard that music was one of the first sectors most affected by COVID and will be one of the last to recover from it. This is especially true for Latin America. The region's GDP had been growing at a slow pace since long before the pandemic, but is now likely to suffer a 10-year setback. Countries like Chile were already crippled by last year's social unrest and were only beginning to recover when the virus hit. Several LatAm territories are experiencing the longest quarantines in the world, with full lockdowns throughout July. At the time of recording, live concerts are not yet allowed in Mexico or Colombia, apart from some sporadic drive-ins. In other territories they are, but with heavy restrictions that make them financially unviable. Uruguay is one of the few examples that managed to control the pandemic and was able to allow the return of a gradual normalization of activities in June. But the impact on the music industry is being felt more intensely here than in other territories. Some examples. In Argentina, local trade association ACR estimates the loss of revenue of record labels at more than 50% on average. 80% of them had to postpone recordings due to the pandemic and will have to lay off 1.7 employees on average. A survey conducted by DataSim in March reported an impact of more than $565 million and 1 million professionals affected in Brazil, with 80% of the events cancelled or postponed. In Chile, according to the Observatorio Digital de la Música Chilena, over 90% of shows had to be suspended. An annual economic decline of more than 41% is estimated for 2020, and about 80% of music companies risk layoffs and bankruptcy in the coming months. Despite the setbacks, the music sector has responded and delivered inspiring content that is helping us through the crisis. But it is also questioning many of its models and putting a magnifying glass on the deficiencies that we already knew, such as the structural precariousness of streaming. Many Latin music companies relied heavily on live revenues, and without the possibility of playing shows, the digital value gap has become even more apparent. Cultural and creative industries need support mechanisms and the development of stimulus measures, as the financial sustainability of the sector is in jeopardy. But despite calls for governments to approve specific plans, their responses have been uneven and generally not sufficient throughout the Latin American region. This pandemic has reinforced the importance of the role of trade associations in raising public awareness and fighting for better conditions for music professionals. The absence of representation in key territories such as Mexico, Colombia, and Peru has deprived the sector of an effective dialogue with their governments. Therefore, no sector-specific plans have been approved, with culture and music being the least of their priorities. And where general support measures were made available, the lack of business and artist censuses and the fact that the Black economy is still huge meant that many were unable to benefit from them. To lay the foundations for a lasting recovery beyond the current crisis, production proximity models should be promoted, considering the small and micro enterprises that make up the independent music industry, fostering professionalization and capacity building. More than ever, international cooperation is proving essential to respond to the pandemic and will be even more vital in the aftermath. It is crucial to guarantee the exchange of knowledge and experiences through decentralized cooperation. An example is WIN's LatAm Network Working Group, where the organization's staff, our associations in the region, and individuals in key territories are working together to assist in associative efforts and with advocacy by sharing helpful information and resources. Despite all the challenges facing the Latin American region, I am confident that independence as a global player with significant transformative and convening power will lead to a better, stronger, and more inclusive reconstruction of the music industry after this pandemic. Thank you.
大家好 ，Hello everyone. I hope you are well and safe. I'm Xiaoman Zhou, co-founder of Kanjian Music. A big thank you to Music Line for this opportunity to share with you more about what is the situation in China today. A brief word about Kanjian Music. We are a music service company. We offer our partners everything from licensing through artist and brand management to business consulting. We were the first to experience the virus, but we were also the first to go back to work. The government here made big decisions, used technology, and a lot of people helped. Today, China is virus free. Not many people want to travel outside China, so they spend their money here. It helps the economy recover faster. Because of the virus, many conferences went digital, and so did we. In China, from July 17th to July 19th, more than 2.5 million music fans and industry professionals went online and to watch the International Indie Music Season. We call it IIMS. IIMS, which we co-hosted, is China's first ever digital music industry event. 3 days of online panels, presentations, and music showcases. IIMS will be running for the rest of 2020, and we are already planning for next year. We hope to do a mix and digital and real-life event. All things considering, 2020 has been a good year for China's digital music business so far. And Tencent 40 million paying users is a great treatment for this. Similarly, our own data shows that revenue from licensing follows the trend of the last few years, steadily growth. Publishing in China has been a hot topic for a few years, and I would like to highlight that this is not really any news. We have been helping our partners collecting publishing royalties directly from the DSP since 2016. We also generate additional revenue for them through a streamlined process for a cover song clearance and sync. I can say that we and China's music business as a whole has not really been affected by the virus. On that note, China is very quick to move online and start live streamings, as you know. On platforms like Huya and Bilibili, musicians hosted their performance and received directly income from fans through digital gifting. In bigger cities like Shanghai, clubs shows start again in March. Recently, even in Wuhan, wherever citizens has been tested for COVID, thousands of people gathered in an open-air water park for an electronic music festival without any masks. Can you imagine it? Last but not least, artist collaborations have been a very effective way to show up in China. Our recent collaborations between Xu Mengyuan and Latvia producer Top was a big success. Talking about collaborations, I would like to showcase our Super Plus project. Go to kanjian.com to check out our collection, introduce Chinese music, ancient and modern. I hope you enjoy it. Thank you all for joining us today. Once again, many thanks to the Sandbox for having me and Kanjian Music. Stay safe. 再见.
Hi, my name is Abidoye. I'm the EVP of Music at Chocolate City Music in Lagos, Nigeria. I'll be speaking on the state of the music business in Nigeria post-COVID. Before I go into my topic, I would like to thank Music Alley for having me on this panel. I hope to shed a little bit of light on the effects of COVID and how music businesses in Nigeria specifically are performing. Before COVID, majority of the revenue that came from music businesses were from artist services, so what we call live performances, brand endorsements, artist appearances, and additional services that usually fall under the management sphere of revenue. But for record labels and recorded music, revenue streams were basically streamlined to physical revenue, which was largely affected by piracy and distorted distribution channels. And the other bulk of the revenue came from telco companies who had music streaming platforms that provided revenue through CRBTs, downloads, and of course streaming. Because data is still expensive, streaming has always has been steadily growing, but was still not a match for the revenue that came from live music and other artist services. With COVID sort of disrupting the nature of things here in Nigeria, and I would say maybe most of the other parts of Africa, because that takes up about 60 to 80% of the revenue that actually comes into music businesses. Most practitioners and stakeholders in the business have had to adjust. And the question has been, how do we run our music businesses in an environment where data is expensive, we have to go digital, and most of the revenue comes from live music. So what happened is, for corporations and companies, they had to look inward and say, how do we streamline the operation so that we have enough money to function as a business? How do we create content that we can release now so that we have revenue coming in? So that changed the dynamic of the business, where instead of working with release calendars, we just were looking to churn out as much content as we could in a short amount of time to bring in enough revenue so that we could keep the business afloat. On the DSP end, because a lot of people had postponed their releases, it gave a lot of African artists, and I would say, I think I can say this specifically for, there was a lot of content from the continent that came out about this time. Jerusalema, Love Wanting Team by CK, we had Haba by Black Bones, we had Oxalate. A lot of people were just releasing content at this time because the DSPs were just hungry to get any content because release calendars were being held back. So what happened is it gave a lot of independent artists, and I would say artists generally from Africa, an opportunity to really put out content at this time. What happened with live music? Obviously, because there was no money coming in with live music, a lot of businesses had to shut down. And because everyone was going online, what we had was, it felt like DJs were leading the way in sort of driving this community online. So DJs would go on IG Live and do sets, every Friday night. People would go gather and just generally enjoy themselves. And then DJs ended up inviting a few artists to come on, and then virtual concerts, which is a concept that we see sort of creeping into the industry, have sort of been, I would say, somewhat embraced. The question has just been, what is the revenue model if this is something that we're going to continue? How do you actually charge people when data is still expensive? How many people can you get online? If you're going to do it, how much money do you actually need to spend? Do you need to get sponsors? So the dynamic for that virtual concerts is still something that people are trying to figure out, but there's definitely a lot more engagement and openness for people to engage in online and virtual concerts. There was the attempt at drive-through concerts, which didn't go quite well. We ended up having people coming out of their cars and actually dancing, and so social distancing rules were difficult to maintain. But in Nigeria, our collection management system is still not as sophisticated, where you have distribution going effectively. So revenue that could have come at that time to support artists was basically non-existent. Live music revenue is still very much low at this time. Recorded music is sort of where most of the revenue is coming, even though what we're seeing is that because revenue coming from Africa, the rates are much lower than revenue that's generated in the UK or the US. What's happening is that you're finding a lot more collaboration between African artists and artists that are international, so that they can tap into the international revenue base to increase the actual revenue that comes in into the business. So those are the dynamics of what's going on. That's the effect of COVID. I think we're going to be seeing a lot more investment into digital content, people just having a stronger presence online, growing that super community so that when content is released, it's released to a specific base that you know would buy. And there'll be a lot more foray of the African market into the international market through collaborations. And that's about it for me. I hope that gave you a nice insight into what's going on in Africa. And we encourage more investment, more collaboration here. So thank you very much.